So I'd like to welcome you all to Sunday service at Ananda Village. My name is Nayaswami Parvati, and this is Nayaswami Pranaba. And I'd like to read from Rays of the One Light, and also to welcome all of our guests and visitors. We're very happy to have you here. But I'd like to read now from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. It's based on Paramhansa Yogananda's teachings. The topic for this week: Dogmatism versus common sense. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, Jesus warns, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns, or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them." Jesus here, as indeed many times during his teaching, counsels people to use their God-given common sense and not to rely on high-flown but undemonstrable claims. Common sense goes beyond abstract reason, for it is rooted in actual experience. Even common sense, however, is deficient when the judgment called for goes beyond sensory experience. Ultimately, what he emphasized always, therefore, was intuitive perception. Thus he expected more of his disciples than crude common sense, and often scolded them for being too literal-minded, as he did elsewhere when they thought his statement, "I have meat to eat that you know not of," meant that he had steaks or sandwiches secreted about his person. His reference, of course, was to spiritual, not material substance. Words, even though appearing in the scriptures, are no substitute for direct perception of truth. Therefore the Bhagavad Gita says in the 2nd chapter, "The sage who knows God has as little need for the scriptures as one might have for a pond when the whole land is covered in flood." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to read to you from Yogananda's book of poems, Songs of the Soul. When I smile, thou dost smile through me. When I cry, in me thou dost weep. When I wake, thou greetest me. When I walk, thou art with me. Thou dost smile and weep, thou dost wake and walk, like me, my likeness thou. But when I dream, thou art awake. When I stumble, thou art sure. When I die, thou art my life. We don't get to read from Songs of the Soul that much. Usually we read from Whispers from Eternity. But it caught me in such a deep way to feel that real pure connection with the divine that Yogananda was writing there. I thought I'd start with offering a dogma. How about that? That dogmas can be a useful thing. They actually can be a positive experience if we see them and use them in a certain way. Why? Because they allow us to actually commit a certain energy in a certain direction. The challenge is when we have a dogmatism around dogmas. And I happened to look in my dictionary I have several dictionaries. I looked in one of them, that's a large one, so it had several definitions for dogma and dogmatism. And it said for dogma, it's simply beliefs. For dogmatism, it associates it with arrogance. And that's interesting that the dictionary itself would say that. But that's where we get into trouble, that we become fixed. Because a dogma is just something, as it says, our belief, something that we're going to move forward with. Hopefully, we'll shed that dogma and move into the depth of the experience behind it. But what happens for us at times is that the dogmas we hold get fixed, and then we start to feel that others should also believe in those dogmas. And that's what we see around us. And that's why we all sort of cringe when we hear the word dogma or dogmatism, because we've probably been exposed to that. To tell you the truth, we've probably exposed others to that as well. Maybe not in this lifetime. Believe me, we've done it to others in other lifetimes. But this life that we're in, you could see it as sort of the image of a maze, that it's not that clear often, although there are many times when we may feel very certain that it's clear, and then hit a passage in the maze that doesn't go anywhere. And so that happens time and time again, and finally we start to learn that maybe with my own resources I'm not quite that proficient in getting there. Maybe another way to understand that is that we misunderstand what's going on. We don't really get the point of what's going on. We get caught by the attractions, our attachments, our desires, and all of that. The other day, Bharat sent me an email of a story and suggested that I use it. So I will use it. Actually, it worked out pretty good. At the church, in the foyer of the church, this little boy around 6 years old is looking up at this plaque, and it has numerous names on it, and on the sides there are some flags. And the pastor comes out, and he sees this boy intently focusing on this plaque, and so he comes over and just stands there and finally says, "Good morning, Sam." And the boy says, "Good morning, Pastor." And they stand there looking at the plaque some more. And then the boy says, "What is this?" And the pastor says, "It's a memorial for all those young men and women that have died in the service." And quiet prevails, and then the boy with a barely audible voice and trembling fear says, "Which service, the 8:30 or the 11 o'clock?" Well, luckily it was the earlier service, in case you were wondering. So. But that point that we don't quite get what's going on. So as a child, it's humorous, but believe me, we miss the point many times. And so that's where the idea of the guru comes in. Because at this point in the calendar, tomorrow is the celebration of the Mahasamadhi of Paramahansa Yogananda. And actually then Wednesday is the celebration of the Mahasamadhi of Swami Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's guru. And the Mahasamadhi simply means, samadhi means that oneness of bliss, that oneness in the absolute with God. And Maha means great. What it refers to is the conscious exit from the physical form, the shell of the body, for a great master to be completely in that oneness without the body form anymore. And so it's a very special sacred time because there are inherent blessings just to be tuning into that, to be in that vibration ourselves. And so tomorrow we'll have celebrations for that, and then on Wednesday likewise for Yogananda's guru. But I was thinking about it a little bit more because there are people here this weekend that are here for the first time. So bear with me as we explore some things, but I think you'll understand fully that a guru is someone that's really, in a sense, our true nature. Now, it's represented by those great souls that have manifest in form to come and help us. Their whole purpose is not to sign us up to be in the party, to be in the group that they're heading up, the organization that they're connected with. Of course, their role is really there to make us like them, to allow us to understand in that maze of life how we can really get where we know we want to be. And that's not just trapped by our desires, our attachments, and the little things of life, but really to soar in that divine heaven of the fullness of God's richness in our lives. And it doesn't come by a magical, poof like that. Although sometimes you'll hear stories where a guru will touch a disciple and that will happen. Well, that's only going to happen if that disciple is completely ready for that experience to happen, or at least close to that. And sometimes it's from the opposite perspective that we learn that lesson. I think a few weeks ago, actually at Sunday service, I'm not sure, one of our other ministers told the story, so bear with me that it's going to be told again. But Chaitanya, one of the great gurus in India back 300 or 400 years ago, was well known to have that, just like a Yogananda or a Christ or a Babaji, that oneness in the divine. And he had disciples at the ashram in India. And at one point, the question started to be asked of Chaitanya, the guru, by the disciples. So how long will it take before I reach that liberation, that oneness in God? And he would honestly tell them that it would be in this lifetime or perhaps several lifetimes for another one. And then the disciple that everyone looked up to as being the closest to that oneness came up. And in humbleness, he asked for what his guru's thoughts were on this. And the guru said, you will find God in many lifetimes. It will take you many lifetimes to find God. And all the other disciples were horrified, of course, because they thought that this one disciple was soaring above all of them and was right there with God. And so they were all kind of looking down. They didn't want to look at him walking past them when he left the room. And they went on in the discourse with the master, with the guru. And then they heard this little noise and they looked behind. And there was this one disciple just dancing with jubilation, with joy, just being in that ecstasy. And they went to him and said, but you must have misheard the master. The master said, it would take you many lifetimes to find God. And the disciple said, no, didn't you hear the master? He said, I would find God. The time was irrelevant. How long it took wouldn't matter. And so the master Chaitanya came up to him and touched him, and he went into that oneness right there. But so we don't know where we're at with it. We don't know what part of the maze we're in, because if you've ever been in a maze, you know they can be tricky. Up in Portland, Oregon, where we directed the Ananda Center for many years, they did this huge maze. And one time the news channel came and took a picture of it, and you realize, my God. And they talked about people being in there for 5, 6, 7 hours. I mean, and you realize that's just a symbolic thing of our lives. We can spend not only hours, but years and lifetimes in the maze that we're involved in. And so when we talk about the guru and the connection for us really in a personal way, that it really comes down to what are we doing on the spiritual path to create the energy flow and the magnetism that will draw that grace. Until that becomes clear and clearer, no matter what presence you're in of the great masters, you could easily not gain anything from it. You could easily just sidestep that which was being presented to you. And we know that there's more to life than just getting stuff. As the affirmation for today is, it's on what? Forgiveness. The essence of offering everything that we harbor as a tension with others or with life itself. When we hold on to the things that bind us, then literally we don't have the capacity anymore in that setting to really tune into God. There's no space for that. There's no connection in that way. And so that forgiveness allows us to be dynamic, to be in that flow, to really open up to something that's more than even what we think. That's why it's an interesting topic today, common sense versus dogmatism. I mean, it quickly goes into that even common sense has to be refined. It can't just be that. But without common sense, we really can't make a progressive step forward. We'll tend to just get caught into theory. And there's a lot of theory in the world, especially in religion. And that's where it becomes easily dogma, and we have dogmatism around that. There's a quick evolution, because unless you and I come to an experience spiritually, we're left in this challenging situation that, well, someone is saying this is what the truth is, but I don't have the experience of that truth. How do I go forward? How do I deal with this? And so typically what you see, unless people go into the direct experience to validate that, you'll have people believing blindly. And dogmatism comes into play that way. Or a lot of people will simply outright reject it. And they'll get into the dogmatism from that perspective, of refuting religion. I was reading a couple of weeks ago that there was a conference down in, I think, the San Diego area that Deepak Chopra was organizing, and it had to do with science and spirituality. And I don't know if Vyasa was interested in going to it, but fascinating thing. And they were just interviewing him in this article about what the goals were for this conference, of really seeing that the premise of science certainly could easily integrate into spirituality. And then I just happened to read the comments, because nowadays the interactiveness, online is as meaningful to most people as the initial thrust of whatever communication, especially news items. And there were probably 30, 40 or more, comments on this little article. 90% of them were real negative, just saying, "Hey, what's this about religion? How can religion even come close to bearing anything worthwhile with science?" I mean, literally, it was just intensely just putting down that spirituality could ever have an integration with science. Well, you realize that's that side of the dogmatism, isn't it? That it's just rejecting outright without saying, hey, what's really going on here? How does this really make sense to us? Because, for instance, there's a number of books recently about atheism, saying that God is dangerous for people because it's brought around a lot of religious war, and warfare in the name of God. And so the hypothesis in one of these books is that because of that, then religion isn't valid and God is not a reality. But then this other book I read talked about, from a scientific point of view, that, well, no, they're not even looking at the evidence that how we actually function in who we are. There's much evidence to say that all our perceptions are simply perceptions of reality. They're not real in themselves. And that if we grow in the way of opening to the perception that there is a divine being, or that we have a spiritual nature to ourselves, our brain actually works in the direction of perceiving that as real as seeing you in front of me. And so this is the scientific response to the scientists saying that there is no God. So it's intriguing to understand that. So when we have common sense as a platform, let's say that as an image or a foundation, then we are grounded. We can at least approach things with a sense of knowing some things, not knowing it all. But that's why Yogananda emphasized, as a tool for our spiritual growth, actually a tool for growth, whether you call it spiritual or not, was constructive doubt. And he made this amazing statement, which I always am intrigued by. He said, it's not a matter that constructive doubt is a good thing, it's a necessity. Because then you can take common sense on something that you're not quite sure about and test it out. Be the yogi scientist and really experiment with these things and see what is there as your experience. What is real for you as your perceptions envelop something that is new to you. The concepts of spirituality are amazing concepts at times. We talk about reincarnation. We talk about cycles of time. We talk about, all sorts of things that from the limited human conscious brain, it's not that easy to suddenly say, sure, that's a great thing for everybody. We've probably had a lot of momentum going from those past lives before us to say that we're able to accept that. But let's just say we don't accept that. The thing is not to refute it out of that negative dogmatism or accept it with blind dogmatism, but to say, well, if there are wise people that I trust accepting something like this, and they're saying it with a sense of calmness and focus as a way to gain in our lives, then maybe it would behoove me to experiment and to at least go in that direction. If nothing else, use something as a working hypothesis for going forward, like reincarnation. I'm not sure I can prove reincarnation is real. You may be able to, but I certainly don't feel 100% sure. But I feel 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure in facts and common sense. But then I can say, well, as a working hypothesis in my life, what will it produce? So my constructive doubt is saying I'm not 100% sure, but if I work with this, if I accept this at least as a model of going forward, then I will see how other things fit into place. That my attitude toward other people, my relationship to other creatures, my sense of how important the moment is for me spiritually, all comes into play in this constructive doubt model, where I realize I'm going forward with something, and I'm trying to, at the same time, with the techniques that take me deeper within, of transcendence, of meditation, that I'm changing myself from the inside out as well. So here I've got this model suddenly that's coming from the thoughts I think, the way that I perceive things, integrated in to the core of who I am in consciousness through meditation. Now that makes a big difference, because it's through meditation that we really secure that experience of intuition. We need to then allow it to be expressed in our lives. We need to play with it in our thoughts, in our way of interrelating to life itself. And that's really what the great masters come for, is to really give us that support through their blessings, because their grace, the grace of God through their blessings, allow us to be lifted up lifted up high so we can see the maze. Once you see the maze, you figure, oh yeah, I can just go there, here, and there, and I don't have to get trapped over here for hours. And so that's what the blessings do from the masters and God. They lift us so that we have the vision. But it's connected, that vision is connected with our common sense and our intuition. It's connected with our experimenting with these things in daily life. It's connected with that inner experience that we have through the techniques such as meditation that cement that as our own permanently. And when we do that, we really do have the possibility of coming to that experience of becoming one, just as the masters are with God. So it's not just a hope. It's a real guarantee. And it's not a guarantee through just believing it. It has to be from our own experience of going into life, moving with this, and being transformed, and then offering ourselves ever more deeply to be an instrument for these blessings to touch many others as well. Let's take a moment for meditation.
May thy wisdom
into the light, the inner sun, into the truth that we're all one. Help us to find in every hour